The moment you feel compelled to justify who you are, you have already lost. Think about that. Every explanation you offer to someone who doubts you is a confession that you doubt yourself. Every defense you mount against criticism is an admission that the critic has authority over your life. How did we become so convinced that our existence requires a committee's approval? We live in a world drowning in explanation. People write essays justifying their career choices to strangers on the internet. They craft elaborate defenses of their parenting styles, their political views, their dietary preferences, their choice of partner. They exhaust themselves translating their inner truth into language that might please an audience that will never be satisfied. And somewhere in all this explaining, they lose the very thing they were trying to protect, the quiet dignity of someone who knows their own mind and needs no permission to follow it. The Stoics faced this same temptation in a world even more brutal than ours. Epictetus could have spent his life explaining why a former slave deserved to be heard on philosophy. Marcus Aurelius could have exhausted himself justifying every imperial decision to a senate that would criticize anything. Seneca could have defended himself endlessly against the accusations that eventually came for him. But they understood something we have forgotten. Explanation to those committed to misunderstanding you is not communication. It is self-destruction disguised as clarity. There is an art to commanding respect, and it has nothing to do with demanding it, earning it through performance, or explaining why you deserve it. Respect is not given to those who ask for it or justify their worthiness. It flows naturally toward those who carry themselves as if their value is self-evident, as if the question of their worth was settled long ago in a courtroom they alone have access to. This is not arrogance. Arrogance is the desperate need to prove superiority. This is sovereignty, the quiet assurance that comes from truly knowing yourself and requiring no external validation of that knowledge. Watch how respect operates in the world. The teacher who constantly explains why students should listen is never truly heard. The leader who justifies every decision is never fully trusted. The friend who defends their boundaries extensively rarely has those boundaries respected. Why? Because explanation signals uncertainty. It broadcasts that you are not quite sure, that you are open to negotiation, that your position is vulnerable to the right argument. And humans, whether consciously or not, test uncertainty. They push against boundaries that seem flexible. They dismiss authority that seems unsure of itself. But there exists another way, the way of the person who simply is what they are, without apology, without defense, without the exhausting performance of justification. This person makes a decision and lives with it, states a boundary and maintains it, holds a position and remains unmoved by the need to convert others to it. And paradoxically, this refusal to explain often generates more understanding than 1,000 carefully crafted justifications ever could. The untrained mind rebels against this. We have been conditioned to believe that good people explain themselves, that clarity requires endless elaboration, that silence in the face of misunderstanding is a form of guilt. But the Stoics saw through this trap. They understood that most misunderstanding is willful. People have already decided what to think, and your explanation simply gives them more material to twist into confirmation of their existing belief. They knew that the person demanding explanation is often not seeking understanding but rather seeking submission, wanting you to perform the ritual of justification that confirms their power over you. Seneca wrote about this in his letters, describing how he watched good people destroy themselves trying to satisfy critics who could never be satisfied. He observed how explanation breeds further questioning, how defense invites deeper attack, how the very act of justifying yourself to someone establishes them as your judge. And he concluded that the wise person distinguishes between those genuinely seeking to understand and those seeking to dominate through the weapon of demanded explanation. Consider your own life. How much energy have you poured into explaining yourself to people who were never going to understand? How many hours have you lost crafting the perfect response to criticism that was never offered in good faith? How often have you defended choices that needed no defense to anyone but yourself? And what did all that explanation earn you? Did respect increase, or did it quietly erode with each justification? The truth is uncomfortable. Every time you explain yourself to someone who has no genuine claim to that explanation, you train them to doubt you. You teach them that your choices are negotiable, that your boundaries are flexible, that your certainty is performative rather than real. And they'll learn, consciously or unconsciously, that applying pressure through questioning will make you fold, will make you perform, will make you exhaust yourself seeking their approval. But the deeper damage is internal. Each unnecessary explanation weakens your relationship with your own judgment. You begin to see yourself through the eyes of your critics, to question choices that were sound, to doubt convictions that were solid. The inner authority, that quiet knowing that guides a well-lived life, gets drowned out by the noise of endless justification. And you become a stranger to yourself, performing a version of you that might satisfy others while abandoning the truth of who you actually are. This is why the Stoic art of commanding respect begins not with how you present yourself to others, but with how you relate to yourself. Marcus Aurelius spent more time examining his own thoughts than defending them to others. He would ask himself, is this action in accordance with nature, with reason, with virtue? And if the answer was yes, the opinion of others became irrelevant, not because he was callous, but because he had done the work of self-examination and reached a conclusion that external judgment could not improve upon. Before we go deeper into this practice, if you are exhausted from constantly justifying your existence, if you are ready to reclaim the power that explanation has been bleeding from you, subscribe to this channel. We are building a community of people who understand that true strength is found not in perfect articulation of our worth, but in unshakable internal certainty that needs no audience. The art of commanding respect without explanation rests on a foundation that most people never build. Self-knowledge so deep that external opinion becomes merely interesting rather than definitive. This is not the shallow self-confidence of someone who has never been tested. This is the diamond-hard certainty of someone who has examined themselves thoroughly, faced their own shadows, acknowledged their limitations, and emerged knowing exactly what they stand for and why. This kind of self-knowledge cannot be borrowed or performed. It must be forged in the fire of honest self-examination. The Stoics practiced this daily, not as narcissistic navel-gazing, but as rigorous philosophical hygiene. They would review their actions, examine their motivations, question their assumptions, and ruthlessly cut away self-deception. And this practice gave them something precious: the ability to stand firm without explanation because they had already cross-examined themselves more thoroughly than any critic ever could. When you know yourself this deeply, something shifts in how you move through the world. Criticism loses its sting because you have already considered whether it might be true. If it is true, you thank the critic and improve. If it is false, you dismiss it without the need for defense. Either way, you remain centered, unmoved by the compulsion to explain yourself into someone else's understanding. This is not coldness, it is clarity. Not arrogance, it is the natural dignity of someone who has done their homework. But our culture makes this difficult. We are taught from childhood that explanation is a moral requirement, that silence in the face of accusation is suspicious, that refusing to justify yourself is a form of contempt for others. These teachings serve a purpose. They keep people compliant, manageable, easy to control through the threat of social judgment. And they create a world where the person with the strongest boundaries is seen as the most problematic, while the person who exhausts themselves explaining is seen as virtuous and open. The Stoics would challenge this entire framework. They would ask, virtuous according to whom? Open to what? Truth or manipulation? They understood that there is nothing moral about explaining yourself to every person who demands it. In fact, there is something deeply immoral about it. It wastes your finite time and energy on fruitless efforts when that same time and energy could be spent on meaningful action. It indulges the entitlement of others to access your internal world without invitation. It privileges social harmony over personal integrity. Epictetus was radical on this point. He taught that you owe explanation only to yourself and to universal reason, the divine order that governs all things. Other people's opinions, even collectively held opinions, had no special claim to truth. The masses could be wrong. The powerful could be foolish. The prestigious could be corrupt. And spending your life seeking to satisfy these variable and often unreliable judges was to miss the entire point of having a rational mind. To think for yourself and stand on that thinking regardless of external pressure. This does not mean the Stoic never explains anything. It means they are deliberate about when and to whom explanation is offered. They distinguish between those genuinely seeking to understand and those seeking to control through demanded justification. They recognize that some relationships and situations genuinely benefit from clarity, while others are energetic black holes that consume explanation without ever producing understanding. And they guard their energy accordingly, offering it where it can bear fruit and withholding it where it will only be wasted. Think about the relationships in your life where explanation actually works, where you can share your reasoning and the other person genuinely considers it, where mutual understanding deepens through dialogue, where both parties are operating in good faith. These relationships are precious, and they deserve your effort at clarity. But now think about the relationships where explanation never satisfies, where every answer spawns 10 new questions, where the goal seems to be keeping you perpetually on trial rather than reaching any real understanding. These relationships are teaching you an important lesson. Some people do not want to understand you. They want to control you, and demanded explanation is their weapon. The Stoic learns to see this pattern clearly and respond accordingly. When someone asks a genuine question, they answer it fully and generously. When someone demands justification as a power play, they decline the game entirely. This discernment is crucial. It prevents you from becoming either closed off to all dialogue or exhausted by endless justification. You remain open where openness serves truth, and closed where openness serves only the other person's need to diminish you. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily in his role as emperor. He faced constant criticism, endless demands for his attention and explanation, perpetual questioning of his decisions. And he developed a practice. He would examine whether the criticism contained any wisdom. If it did, he extracted that wisdom and implemented it without resentment. If it did not, he released it without explanation or defense. This was not ignoring feedback. It was processing feedback through his own reason rather than being controlled by it. The key distinction is this: the Stoic takes in information, considers it seriously, and makes their own determination about its validity. They do not outsource their judgment to others, but neither do they dismiss input arrogantly. They use their reason, properly trained and rigorously applied, as the filter for all external opinion. And once that reason has reached a conclusion, they stand on it without the need to bring others along for the journey. Your agreement is welcome but not required. Your understanding is appreciated but not necessary. Your approval is irrelevant. This stance produces a particular kind of presence that people instinctively recognize and respect. When you meet someone who is genuinely certain, not performing certainty, not faking confidence, but actually grounded in clear internal knowing, something in you responds to that groundedness. You may disagree with their position, but you respect that they have a position and are not constantly shape-shifting to please you. You may not understand their choices, but you recognize they are not seeking your permission to make them. This is the respect that the Stoics spoke of, not the brittle respect maintained through constant performance and justification, but the solid respect commanded by someone who clearly knows their own mind and has no need to convince you of anything. It is the difference between the respect you give someone because they have won your approval and the respect you give someone because they so clearly do not need it. But achieving this requires confronting one of our deepest fears, the fear of being misunderstood. For most people, being misunderstood feels like a form of death, a social annihilation where your true self remains invisible while a false version is judged and condemned. And this fear drives the compulsion to explain, to correct every misperception, to ensure that everyone sees you as you actually are. But this is an impossible goal, a Sisyphean task that can never be completed because you do not control other people's perception. The Stoics offer liberation from this fear through a simple recognition. Being misunderstood is inevitable, and it is survivable. In fact, it is often irrelevant. What does it matter if someone holds a false image of you in their mind? How does their misperception actually harm you, unless you grant it the power to do so? They are not living your life. They are not making your choices. They are not experiencing your reality. They are simply running a simulation of you in their own mind, and that simulation says more about them than it does about you. Seneca went further, suggesting that being misunderstood by certain people is actually a sign that you are living correctly. If the cruel understand you, perhaps you are too cruel. If the shallow appreciate you fully, perhaps you lack depth. If everyone comprehends you easily, perhaps you are living too safely, too conventionally, too small. There is a kind of misunderstanding that is the natural consequence of living with integrity in a world that often values performance over substance. This does not mean you should deliberately court misunderstanding or take pride in being difficult to comprehend. It means you should be willing to accept misunderstanding as the price of authenticity, as the inevitable friction between your actual complexity and others' limited perception. And you should refuse to shrink yourself, to simplify yourself, to explain yourself into something more digestible just to ease others' confusion. Your complexity is not a problem to be solved, it is the truth of who you are. The practical application of this philosophy changes how you navigate daily life. Someone criticizes a decision you have made. The old pattern. Launch into elaborate explanation of your reasoning, cite evidence, defend your choice point by point, seek to change their mind and win their approval. The Stoic pattern. Pause, consider whether the criticism contains any valid insight, extract any wisdom it offers, and then move on without explanation. If they persist, a simple statement, "I have considered your perspective and reached a different conclusion." No defense, no justification, no performance. This feels dangerous at first. Your nervous system screams that you must explain, must defend, must make them understand. But if you can sit with that discomfort, something remarkable happens. Most people, denied the argument they were seeking, simply move on. The criticism that seems so important evaporates when you refuse to feed it with defensive energy. And the few who continue demanding explanation reveal themselves clearly. They were never interested in understanding, only in the power dynamic of making you justify yourself. The same principle applies to boundaries. You decline an invitation, a request, an expectation. The old pattern. Elaborate explanation of why you cannot or will not participate, detailed justification of your limitations, perhaps even a touch of self-deprecation to soften the refusal. The Stoic pattern. A simple, kind, but complete statement. "I am not available for that. That does not work for me. I have chosen differently. Full stop. no explanation that can be negotiated with, no justification that can be argued against, no opening for the other person to solve your problem. So you will say yes. This practice strengthens with repetition. The first time you decline without explanation, you feel rude, guilty, anxious about the other person's reaction. But you do it anyway, and you survive. The second time, the discomfort is slightly less. By the 10th time, you begin to notice something. People actually respect these clear, unexplained boundaries more than the elaborately justified ones. The boundary that comes with a lengthy explanation feels negotiable, temporary, possibly changeable if the right argument is made. The boundary that comes as a simple statement feels solid, permanent, not open for discussion. Epictetus taught his students a powerful practice. Distinguish between what is in your control and what is not, and invest your energy accordingly. Your actions, your choices, your character, these are within your control and worthy of your full attention and effort. Other people's understanding, approval, agreement, these are not within your control and should receive only minimal energy. This is not selfishness. It is proper allocation of your finite resources toward what actually matters and what you can actually influence. When you explain yourself endlessly to others, you are violating this fundamental principle. You are pouring energy into trying to control their perception, their judgment, their response, all things outside your control. Meanwhile, the things that are within your control, the quality of your choices, the integrity of your actions, the cultivation of your character, may be neglected for lack of the energy you are wasting on fruitless explanation. The Stoic redirects that energy. Instead of explaining yourself to others, you examine yourself rigorously. Instead of justifying your choices to external judges, you ensure those choices align with your values. Instead of performing certainty for an audience, you cultivate actual certainty through philosophical practice. And this redirection creates a virtuous cycle. The more energy you invest in genuine self-development, the less you need external validation. The less you need external validation, the less you explain yourself. The less you explain yourself, the more respect you command. And the more respect you command, the more energy you have for further self-development. This cycle produces what might be called dignified presence, a way of being in the world that is neither aggressive nor defensive, neither closed nor performing. You are simply yourself, grounded in self-knowledge, available for genuine connection but unmoved by the demand for constant justification. People sense this quality even if they cannot name it. They recognize that they are in the presence of someone who knows something they do not, someone who has found a kind of freedom they are still seeking. But we must address a common misunderstanding of this philosophy. Some people hear, "Stop explaining yourself," and interpret it as permission for rudeness, for dismissiveness, for complete disregard of others. This is not the Stoic way. The Stoics were deeply ethical, profoundly concerned with living in harmony with others and contributing to the common good. Their refusal to explain was not contempt. It was discernment about where explanation serves a genuine purpose and where it serves only the ego's need to be understood. Marcus Aurelius would explain his reasoning when it helped his advisors implement his vision effectively. Seneca would share his philosophical insights extensively with those genuinely seeking wisdom. Epictetus taught for years, offering explanation after explanation to students who were hungry to learn. But none of them explained themselves to hostile critics, to bad faith questioners, to people seeking to control them through demanded justification. They recognized the difference between communication that builds understanding and performance that feeds dysfunction. This discernment is the art within the art, learning to sense when explanation serves truth and when it serves only the other person's need to keep you subordinate. It requires you to be honest about the dynamics at play. Is this person genuinely confused and seeking clarity? Then explain generously. Are they testing your boundaries to see if you will hold them? Then stand firm without justification. Are they operating from genuine curiosity about your perspective? Then share it freely. Are they demanding that you convince them you have the right to your own choices? Then decline the conversation entirely. The ability to make these distinctions comes from practice and from the self-knowledge we discussed earlier. When you are clear about your own motivations and values, you can more easily see when someone else is operating in good faith or bad faith. When you have examined your own choices thoroughly, you can tell the difference between someone pointing out a genuine flaw and someone simply trying to make you dance. When you are grounded in your own worth, you do not feel threatened by someone's misunderstanding and therefore do not feel compelled to correct it. This groundedness also changes how you receive genuine criticism. Instead of becoming defensive, you become curious. Instead of immediately explaining why the criticism is wrong, you investigate whether it might be right. You can do this because criticism is no longer an attack on your fundamental worth. It is simply information, potentially useful data about how you might improve. The person who does not need to explain themselves has nothing to prove and therefore nothing to defend. They can consider all input objectively because their peace does not depend on being right. Seneca wrote about this kind of equanimity, describing how the wise person receives praise and criticism with equal calm, not because they do not care about truth, but because they do not derive their sense of self from others' opinions. Praise might indicate they are on the right track, but it does not make them more valuable than they were before receiving it. Criticism might reveal an area for improvement, but it does not diminish their fundamental worth. Both are processed through reason, and reason does not need to explain itself defensively because it is seeking truth, not validation. This philosophical stance has immediate practical benefits. Think about how much time you currently spend in defensive explanation. Add up the hours spent crafting responses to criticism, the energy spent rehearsing justifications, the mental space occupied by imaginary arguments with people who questioned you. Now imagine reclaiming all of that time and energy for something meaningful, for your work, your relationships, your own development, your rest. This is not a small thing. This is your life coming back to you in hours and days and years. But the deeper benefit is internal, the sense of sovereignty that comes from no longer being on trial, no longer performing for an audience, no longer requiring permission to be who you are. This sovereignty does not make you isolated or disconnected. In fact, it often creates deeper connections because you are finally relating to others as yourself rather than as a carefully managed image. When you are not exhausting yourself with explanation and performance, you have energy for actual presence, for listening, for genuine exchange. The paradox is that people often understand you better when you explain yourself less. Your actions become clearer when they are not clouded by constant justification. Your character becomes more visible when it is not hidden behind defensive explanations. Your values become more apparent when you simply live them rather than perpetually arguing for them. The person who needs no explanation is often the most clearly understood, because their life speaks with a coherence that words could not improve upon. Marcus Aurelius lived this truth. History remembers him not for his explanations but for his actions, not for his justifications but for his character, not for his defenses but for his philosophical practice. He ruled Rome during plague, war, and political chaos, and he did it with a steadiness that needed no explanation because it was self-evident in every choice he made. People saw his integrity in his deeds, not in his explanations of those deeds. This is the standard the Stoic sets. Let your life explain you. Let your choices speak for your values. Let your consistency demonstrate your character. And when questioned, when criticized, when misunderstood, remain calm, remain centered, remain unmoved by the need to bring everyone along into your reasoning. Some will understand naturally, some will never understand no matter how much you explain. And both outcomes are acceptable when you are no longer deriving your worth from others' comprehension of it. The practice, then, is simple but not easy. Start noticing when you feel compelled to explain yourself. Pause in that moment and ask, is this explanation necessary? Will it genuinely help someone who is operating in good faith? Or am I simply uncomfortable with being misunderstood, uncomfortable with someone's disapproval, uncomfortable with the gap between who I am and who they think I am? If it is the latter, practice sitting with that discomfort instead of trying to explain it away. Start with small things. Someone questions a minor choice, what you are eating, how you spend your free time, a small boundary you have set. Instead of launching into explanation, simply acknowledge their comment and move on. I have made a different choice. This works for me. I am comfortable with my decision. Notice the discomfort that arises. Notice the urge to justify, to convince, to bring them into agreement. And notice that you can survive without satisfying that urge. As you practice with small things, you build capacity for larger ones. Someone questions a major life choice, your career, your relationship, your life direction. The old pattern would be to mount an elaborate defense, to gather evidence of your rightness, to seek their approval and validation. The new pattern: you have already examined this choice thoroughly in your own reasoning. You have weighed it against your values and found it sound. Therefore, external questioning is just noise, potentially interesting if it contains insight, but ultimately irrelevant to the decision you have already made from your own centered wisdom. This is not stubbornness. The stubborn person refuses to change even when presented with better information. The Stoic remains always open to truth, always willing to adjust based on genuine insight. But they have learned to distinguish between genuine insight and mere opinion, between wisdom offered in good faith and criticism wielded as a weapon. And they reserve their explanation for those who have earned it through their genuine seeking, not for those who demand it as a display of power. As we close, understand that the art of commanding respect without explanation is really the art of respecting yourself enough that external validation becomes optional rather than essential. It is the practice of knowing yourself so thoroughly that others' misunderstanding cannot shake you. It is the discipline of allocating your energy toward what you control and releasing what you do not. It is the freedom of someone who has settled the question of their worth internally and no longer needs the world to confirm it. If this resonates with you, if you are ready to stop performing for approval and start living from your own ground, subscribe to this channel and join others walking this path. The Stoics discovered something that remains true across millennia. The person who needs no explanation commands respect that no amount of justification could ever earn. Not because they are perfect, but because they are whole. Not because they never doubt, but because they resolve their doubts through self-examination rather than seeking resolution from others. Not because they are always right, but because they are always honest with themselves about what they know and what they do not know. This is the path. This is the practice. This is the life that waits for you when you finally stop explaining yourself and start being yourself. The world will question, criticize, misunderstand. And you, grounded, clear, sovereign, will continue on your path. Not because you convinced everyone it was the right path, but because you know it is yours to walk.